Since the beginning of this year, I've been doing a weekly sketchbook drawing in my Hobonichi Weeks planner. In this video, I'll give you a tour of my first 6 months of weekly drawings, and we'll talk about what I've enjoyed about using this planner format. But before we get started, I'll introduce myself. My name's Caitlin Keegan, and I'm an author and illustrator based in Brooklyn, New York. I created the Illuminated Tarot and the new Happy Houseplant series published by Clarkson Potter. Now let's get into the sketchbook. So I got a head start in this planner, and I used the 52nd week of 2023 as the first spread. And these pasta shapes were just inspired by the quote at the bottom of the page, which is like a little cooking tip. This is also the first time I really drew with a fountain pen, and it's using a platinum preppy with a converter and a diamine ink called Aurora Borealis. So the first official week of 2024, I'd been looking at a lot of iris tattoos that I really liked, and this inspired me to draw some in here. This was with a Uniball Signo 0.38 size, which is very fine, and then a colored pencil. I wasn't sure yet what media would work in here, so I was pretty conservative with these first few spreads, and it's mainly colored pencil and different kinds of pen. For week 2, I drew my son, Diego, just a bunch of little poses from different photos I had. I felt like this little collage that kind of reflected his personality. And this is also with Uniball Signo and colored pencil accents. And you can see that it did actually, the colored pencil from the previous page did actually blend through, but I think this is the only spot where that happened so far. For week 3, this was another spread that was inspired by the page quote, which I'll read to you. These are all very random quotes that they have at the bottom of the weekly spreads. But this one says, "If I hadn't met someone I thought was the one, I'd still be single. And I think I would have loved being single. Single or married, life can be fun either way. I'm thinking about love. And thinking about love, I think that's the first thing to remember." So to kind of illustrate that idea, I was looking up different kinds of solitary animals and settled on drawing different solitary birds. And for week 4, another one inspired by the quote, which is another cooking quote about cooking different kinds of green vegetables. What I like about these little quotes at the bottom, they're very mundane quotes, but I find that sort of comforting in a way. So this week 5 spread is the first of many that was inspired by a show or an art exhibit that I went to, and this one was Tal R and David Shrigley at Anton Kern Gallery. I love both of these artists, but I'm especially a Tal R fan. I think the first time I saw his work was at another gallery in like 2012, and I just really like his use of color and pattern. And in this case, I was inspired by his ink drawings of hands drawing, and I also was kind of inspired by how loose the style was, so I tried to get a little bit of that energy into this drawing with like a looser, sketchier, messier look with colored pencil first, and then drawing over it with ink, and then filling in the rest with colored pencil. And then for week 6, I pulled some inspiration from this the Taschen Alchemy and Mysticism book. And I was particularly drawn to the lettering and the ways that the clouds and smoke were illustrated, because these are two of my favorite things to draw: clouds, smoke, and water, and of course plants. And then week 7 of 2024 was when my niece was born. And this is the first one that's kind of like marking an event in my life versus like an inspiration. And these were drawings from just photos of her sleeping. And I added some washi tape that I also use for special dates in the rest of the planner, like mainly on the monthly calendar. And focused in on her teeny tiny hand in the bottom corner. I'll show you what the tape looks like that I'm using and the brand name. I usually save the little paper that comes with it. I also have these little scissors that I got from JetPens, and I really like these because they fold up tiny into like a little pen sized, and so I can keep them in with, my other drawing and journaling supplies really easily. My week 8 drawing is a Flacco memorial drawing. Flacco was the owl that escaped the Central Park Zoo and managed to evade authorities for a year or so. He was an inspiration to us all, New Yorkers and everyone. Gone far too soon. I thought the quote here just happened to be very poignant with this drawing. It says on the bottom, if you only learn how to live without failure, you will be very weak. And I also included some moon phases because there was a full moon during this week, and that felt sort of cosmically significant as well. My week 9 drawing was inspired by the New York Botanical Garden Orchid Show. And the theme of this year's show was florals and fashion, and there were some very insane fashions. Some of my favorites I'll put up on the screen, and there was a lily pad dress that I really liked, and more casual outfits on some animal mannequins. There was a frog wearing a little succulent outfit that I liked, but for the drawing I focused on just my favorite orchid species, the ones that I had taken photos of at the show for reference. For week 10, I was honestly kind of stumped about what to draw, and in this case, the quote on the page was not really helping me either. I ended up just drawing some different plants that I happened to see on Instagram, and then I was also experimenting with these. They're called pasta markers. It's basically like a waxy crayon, and they have really nice packaging that I'll show you. But I heard about these there's a YouTuber that I follow, littletinyegg, and they were using them, so I wanted to try it. I still haven't found like the exact right way that I enjoy using these, but this was my first try with that. For week 11, I drew these ceramic medicine containers that I saw at an antique center in Connecticut. I think they're 19th century French apothecary jars, and they had these gold accents, and this was my first try using Posca acrylic paint markers, not as opposed to pasta that I used in the last spread. And I love the metallic Posca markers, as you'll see in subsequent pages. I also love doing the lettering on these jars. This was a really fun one. So for week 12, we have more Diego in like a little bit of a Warhol-esque style, just drawn twice from the same photo, and again with metallic Posca marker and fountain pen. And maybe a little bit of a Basquiat influence with the halo. He is an angel. And then the next week, week 13, this was another one inspired by the page quote, which talks about counting down to go to sleep. So I still had sort of this folk art style in my mind from when I was in the antique store the previous week. So I drew this sheep in a kind of an American folk art style. And this is where I really went for it with the Posca paint markers. And this was so much fun. I find that sometimes my sketchbook drawing style feels much different from my usual illustration style because I'm usually drawing from life or from a photo in the sketchbooks and using different tools This spread looks the most like how I would illustrate digitally because it's a mostly made up image, and I was also with the markers able to layer color on color the same way that I would in my digital work. This spread kind of felt like a little bit of a breakthrough for me because I've been trying to get more into traditional media and a little bit away from digital. And then week 14, more Posca marker, and this was the week of the solar eclipse. And I loved doing this one too. This was another favorite of mine. And again, it's like a little bit more similar to my digital illustration style because of the layering of the colors. And of course, like the integrating of the metallic marker with the solid marker. I just find that very satisfying somehow. And with the acrylic paint pens, I was actually very surprised that they worked as well as they did on the Tomoe River paper because the paper is very thin and I definitely thought it would bleed through, but it actually works really nicely. Week 15, I feel like I had another kind of breakthrough moment on this one. These were tulips that I saw at the Brooklyn Botanic Garden, and I just took a bunch of photos and then kind of like collaged them in the drawing. And again, with the metallic paint marker in the background. And what I really love about this is the parts where I sort of made a mistake in overlapping the drawing, and then when I went back to color it, I sort of made those mistakes like part of the composition. And this is the kind of thing that never would happen when I work digitally, so this was another reminder to me of the value of the physical sketchbook. And then for week 16, I saw online that this sign at an auto body shop that had been there for years in Brooklyn on Atlantic Avenue was recently painted over. It has this character Sharita. It's like a pink dinosaur, but it was kind of like a landmark, so I'm memorializing it. For week 17, dandelions, again based on the quote, and I'll read the quote. It says, "While out for a walk, my 4-year-old son held up a dandelion and said, 'I'm not puffing this one. Okay, are you just going to hold on to it? The winds of the earth will make it fly away. My, how grand.'" This one I had a lot of fun making too because of the mix of pen drawing over the Posca marker and the drawing of white over black for the pollen. And just designing the composition was really fun. Depending on when you're seeing this show might still be at the Brooklyn Museum. It was Hiroshige Woodcuts. It runs through August 4th, 2024. And I'm probably going to go back again because I found the show so inspiring. It's Hiroshige's 100 famous views of Edo, and Edo is Tokyo in the time when he created these prints, which was 1856, 1858. I have so many favorite prints from this series, and I ended up buying the Taschen book that had all the prints in it. And I was lucky to go with a friend who is both a Japanese speaker and knowledgeable about woodblock prints, so I got a nice perspective from her. And I also had heard an interview with the curator of this show on WNYC who talked about how these prints were filed away in the library at the Brooklyn Museum until they realized that they were actually original prints and not reproductions. So they've finally taken them out of the book that they were in and displayed them as art. And it's really cool to look closely at these prints and see like the wood grain texture from the blocks. I drew this view in Posca and fountain pen. I loved the cherry blossoms and the way that the clouds and the waterfall were stylized. And then for week 19, I had some photos that I hadn't drawn from yet. Actually, as I was walking up to the Brooklyn Museum the previous week, I walked through the Brooklyn Botanic Garden again, and I happened to be there at the same time that actually my favorite my favorite time of year at the Brooklyn Botanic Garden, where the tree peonies are in bloom. And they're huge. They're huge flowers, like dinner plate sized, where I finally replaced the cartridge with a waterproof cartridge, which seems to be working much better with the paint pens. And I'm also trying the Molotow paint pens. I love the Poscas, but I wanted something that was refillable, and although the texture of the paint is a little different, I think I'm probably going to stick with the Molotow markers going forward, just so I can replace the ink instead of the whole pen. And then for week 20, I drew from this reference photo I took of Diego and plants looking out the window. And to be honest, I really disliked this after I painted it. It just didn't match the vision I had in my mind. And it's funny how not looking at this for a few weeks totally changed my mind. Like, I've had a little bit of distance and now I really like this. So then for week 21, this was the week that I went to the Metropolitan Museum of Art. And during that weekend, I saw the Sleeping Beauties exhibit. That one is up until September 2nd, 2024. And they called it a sensory exhibit because you can hear, for example, like the sounds that a garment makes when it's worn. Like, there was an Alexander McQueen dress made from shells, and they had like the sound that was piped in. And then you can smell these like preserved flower headpieces. It's a pretty cool exhibit. I would say if you do go, just be prepared to wait a little while. They have you join like a digital queue when you arrive, and then they text you when it's time to wait on the actual physical line. But there's also a really great Harlem Renaissance exhibit that's right next to it, and that's up until July 28th, and I really recommend checking that one out too. So this was a pattern from one of the older pieces in the exhibit. I loved the hand-drawn quality of the pattern and the silvery background, and especially the way these sort of like furry spiky stems were drawn. Finally, this is my last one for now. This is the first half of the year that I'm showing. So these are more flowers, and I think it's foxglove from a photo that I took while I was visiting a friend in Rhode Island. We went to a bunch of nurseries and plant shop. This was from the Farmer's Daughter in South Kingston, Rhode Island, that's where I took the photos that these were based on. If you keep a physical planner or a journal, do you draw in it? I'm also curious to know which one you use. I'm planning to film a second half for this sketchbook planner tour, so if you're interested in part 2, I hope you'll subscribe so you don't miss it. Thanks so much for watching, and I'll see you next time.